All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Thrilled as always to be joined by Sarah Peyton. Sarah, welcome.
Oh, guys, I'm very happy to be here.
All right. So Sarah is a certified trainer of nonviolent communication. She teaches people how language changes relationships in the brain. She works with audiences internationally to create a compassionate understanding of the effects of relational trauma on the brain and writes about and teaches people how words change and heal us. Her special interest is the way that difficult events impact our automatic brain patterning and how to transform our tendencies towards self-criticism into self-worth. Her first book is titled Your Resonant Self, Guided Meditations and Exercises to Engage Your Brain's Capacity for Healing. Her second book, which we're going to be talking about today, is titled Your Resonant Self Workbook, From Self-Sabotage to Self-Care. It takes us through the world of relational neuroscience and, using the lens of unconscious contracts, explores how our brains, nervous systems, and bodies react to the brains, nervous systems, and bodies of others. This workbook provides the tools to turn inward with kindness, warmth, and curiosity and create opportunities for self-healing. And I'm going to be kind to myself because I unplugged my computer power cord again. Hang on one second.
Okay, we're hanging.
All right. So welcome again. Let me just say that before I ask you questions about your book and start off here, I opened the book and I was going through it and I was like immediately taken in because it in gently, I don't want to say force, but it invited me to really ask questions about myself and what was going on with me, and the patterns that I certainly have that are stuck patterns, I would say. It's intense.
Yes, it is.
It's intense. It's not a joke. I mean, you know, the way you ask questions, and this is something I think that I've noticed about you, um, the way you ask questions and the kind of questions you ask are very absorbing, and they cut to the bone. So having said that, we'll jump into maybe how this impacted me more, not to turn this to me, but thank you so much for being here. Why did you write this book?
Ah, I wrote this book because I wrote the first book, the Your Resonant Self book, and I was traveling all over the world. Of course, it was before COVID. I was physically traveling all over the world, talking to people everywhere about self warmth, which is so important and changes absolutely everything from the very sort of microcellular level of the immune system to how much oxygen our red blood cells carry, to how quickly we heal from viruses and colds, to the macro of how we treat each other and what kind of systems we create and how we deal with things like systemic injustices. So it's like from the macro to the micro, self warmth is the most important
Mm-hmm.
thing. And yet, people would be stopped as I would guide them toward the possibility of self warmth. They would be stopped. And what was so surprising to me was that they would be stopped by their own integrity. That they would, that like there would be like, I can't have self warmth for myself because I really truly believe that I'm not worth it. You know, it would not be an integrity for me to have self warmth. And then of course other things too. I can't have warmth for myself. No one in my family has ever had warmth for themselves. That would make me a complete total alien in my family system. So many different ways that people were blocking themselves from this incredibly important movement that's so important for our world and for ourselves. And and so I thought, what's going on? How are we blocking ourselves? And I started to think of it as a kind of a contractual agreement that we had with ourselves. And I often think about these contracts, which is what the workbook is all about, as um, ways that we stop our vulnerable human bodies from being in relationship with the world as it is. And so, surprisingly to me, when we began to formulate these ideas about integrity and loyalty and stopping the harm to ourselves and others, then the contractual language really worked for people. It was like it gave them a sense of the seriousness of the agreement that they were engaged in with themselves to make things, to make the harm stop, however, whatever the perception of harm was, even though those contracts were really outdated. They really
Mm-hmm.
came from earlier days when we had no power in our childhoods, or moments of intense trauma when we were adults when we had no power. They're contracts made to help us with helplessness, even though now we're not helpless.
Right.
So once people began to see this with the contractual language, they started to go, hey, I don't want this. I release myself from this contract.
Mm.
And then, of course, the next question is, what do we put in its place? And so we started to play with blessings, and people all over the world were saying, instead of believing that I have no worth and no substance, I give myself the blessing to believe that I have substance. And there was such a change, and people got to go in the direction that I wanted them to go in. So that was why I wrote the book.
So the why people, for example, uh, say to themselves, "Oh, I couldn't, feel self-warmth to myself," is, and I know you talk about this in the book, though, but is that both conscious and unconscious? Is it because of these unconscious contracts that we have with ourselves?
Yes, and it seems that what all of us know is we know part of the contract. So this is why I call them unconscious contracts, because part of it's conscious. People will even remember the moments when they make the contracts. Like for example, I remember that I was in seventh grade, and I got the highest score on the math test in the classroom. And I looked around, and people were really nice. They weren't being mean or anything, but I felt like I was so different from them.
Mm.
And I was like, I quit. I was inside myself. I was like, I quit. I am not going to be the smartest one anymore. And it was like a relinquishment of a gift, it's sort of terrifying. So I knew that part. But what I didn't know was what the in order to was. So I knew, I swear to myself, I will no longer be the smartest one. And I could sort of guess in that the in order to was in order to belong, but there's something deeper, because when we don't know, when we think we know what a contract is, then we don't actually know. There's something deeper, and it's usually relational. Like, we think of ourselves, we're raised in the Western world to think of ourselves as little autonomous individuals. We have our own little trauma packages. We're walking through our lives, doing our thing. We need to take care of our own trauma. Like, there's not really this sense of relationality. So if I go deeper there into, I will not be the smartest one in the room, it goes directly, I can feel it. I haven't actually done this one before, so this is a live demonstration. I can feel it going through belonging into the place where my mother was absolutely hampered by trauma in the way she could use her brain. And if I was the smartest one, I had to leave her. And so the actual contract would be, I, Sarah, solemnly swear to my essential self not to be the smartest one, in order to be able to stay with my mother so that she's not alone, no matter the cost to myself. And then you can feel it in your body when you go below what you think you know into the relational space. Then your body goes, oh yeah, that's a big one.
Mm.
We don't need that anymore. That was from that was from being 18 months old, or 2 years old. No,
So
no longer
in
need.
that way, you bring self-awareness to it, obviously, and that's the beginning of working towards what, repairing that. How does that reparation kind of solidify in a sense? Is
Well,
it?
a lot of it solidifies with, there's this wonderful thing that humans do when they have moments of insight, where there's a brain reorganization. They can see gamma waves of insight moving through the brain and like realigning the ways that the neurons touch each other. And moments of insight are some of the most stable changes that we make as humans. I remember my chemistry teacher in my high school. She had a poster on the wall, and it said, "The human brain, once stretched to a new idea, will never return to its original shape." And there's something in that that's like there's an aha moment as you begin to think about yourself relationally when you've always thought of yourself autonomously, that allows for deep and sustainable change, sustained change. Um, and yeah, so
Yeah, it's very, very interesting to me because as I was going through this and I was debating whether or not I was going to, you know, share this just for obvious reasons, but it really made me think of my own contracts I have with myself. And one of them is so, well, I don't want to say, I guess it is a contract, but so vivid, so vivid. I remember when I was switching schools, I must have been like 10 or 11. And I was in the process of switching schools, and my mom took me to tour this possible new school. And I remember we did it, and then we were out on the playing field. There was no one else there. It was just myself, my mother, and this administrator. And I heard him, I was kind of walking off a little bit, and I heard him telling my mother that I was not like good enough academically for this school. And Sarah, to this friggin' day, I have this thing about not being smart enough. So I'm almost like the exact opposite of you.
I will
Like
believe.
not being smart enough.
Mm,
And you probably can imagine the many ways that potentially could have impacted me. And it did. And
yes,
still to this day. And I'm like, holy crap. So it's crazy.
yes.
It is crazy. It's and the definition that you use in terms of trauma in the book, you say you're going to use a kind of a non-traditional definition of trauma, really kind of sat with me. So anyway, I just share that because it's going through this book, I love the way you organize it and allow people to meet, come face to face with these contracts and
Mm.
work through them. So it's intense.
It is. It's very intense.
You're making me feel.
Darn.
It's what it is. It's like you feel it. You feel
Mhm.
it. It's great. We all have these little things. They're
Yeah,
not so little.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We really do, and they're made out of our best effort to survive. The contracts are made out of our best effort to survive. They're made out of our best efforts to love, to care for ourselves. Like, I mean, the whole thing when we have those moments, like this moment that you're describing, and I don't know what the inside of it is for you, but for many people, in those moments, we like relinquish the idea that we could be smart or beautiful or loved or whatever in order to keep ourselves from ever having a broken heart again. It's like, I never want to be surprised by that kind of thing again. So
Mhm.
I'm just going to believe that I'm not good enough, and then if I'm just carrying that protective belief through the world, I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to ever have my heart broken like this again. And we humans do not do well with unaccompanied disappointment and heartbreak.
So let's talk a little bit about how. First of all, who's the book for?
The book is for um, folks who have thought about this idea of self warmth and have thought that is not possible for me. It's for people who are interested in the brain, because it's got a whole journey through all of the systems of the brain and the body and their interrelationship and how it circles around emotions. So anybody who's interested in the brain would also love it. And people who are just kind of like thinking that change is not possible.
Mm.
People who are
I think
tired.
that way.
Oh,
I do. I do. I do. I do honestly feel that way. Go ahead. Let me just input that. I do feel that way sometimes. I get caught in there.
and of course, then all of my contract neurons are sparkling and going, oh, a contract to believe that change is not possible. What a good
Yeah,
contract.
yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about how you organize the book because I love the way you did it. Um, so share with our listeners how you organize it in the different chapters and so forth.
Yeah. Well, it follows along with the original book, Your Resonant Self, to bring this added dimension. So it's got a little bit of a review of the brain system and how it gets involved in contracts, and then what kinds of contracts it'll make. Because of course we all have all different kinds of contracts. We can have contracts about how we see ourselves, as you and I both spoke about from our childhoods. We can have contracts not to feel certain emotions, and these start
Mhm.
so early. You and I think, have talked about Beatrice Beebe's amazing research before. She's the one in New York City who has been doing 30 or 40 years of close video of moms and babies. And what she discovered is that by the age of 4 months, we have edited our facial expression vocabulary to match that of our mothers.
Wow.
So, if our moms were raised with avoidant attachment, one of the hallmarks of avoidant attachment is that avoidantly attached moms don't pick up their babies when they're crying. So, if we've been raised with avoidant attachment, we've learned that the entire circuit of panic grief, which is one of Panksepp's circuits of emotion and motivation, needs to be turned off or diminished as much as possible, that it's not an allowable sort of subject of facial expression conversation. We must not have sad eyes. We must not have sad mouths. And what we'll see folks who have contracts not to be sad, not to show sadness, not to burden others with their sadness. And we can see people's mouths. They'll be crying and their mouth will still be turned up in a smile.
Boy.
This is an example of very, very clear early contracts that we have, not to be who we are, not to be sad, so that we get to keep people with us.
Mhm.
And so these are the kinds of things that come out in the book as we go kind of through brain system emotional systems, looking at what are the different ways that we limit and diminish our life energy, because our circuits of emotion and motivation are where our life energy flows. And in the best of all possible worlds, we are a complex system, like a choir singing, where sometimes the song is a grief song, sometimes the song is an anger song, sometimes the song is warm curiosity, sometimes the song is love, sometimes the song is fear or terror. But we're moving always fluidly within these different feelings of life energy, which makes our life much richer, as opposed to if we're only focused on, and many of us are in this world, only focused on the seeking circuit, with some little blips of anger slipping through every now and then, and everything else is off limits. Play is off
Mhm.
limits, sexuality is off limits, grief is off limits. It's just like, no, that stuff is over there and we don't want that. All we want to do is be focused on work, getting things done, making sure everybody's safe and the house mortgage is paid, and like that's what we're doing. And all of that richness is off limits because of these early contracts that we've made. So the book takes us through all of the different brain systems so that we can begin to explore how have we how are we diminishing our contact with life as it is right now.
Mhm. Yeah, what you said about you know allowing ourselves to be who we are, and when you said that, I was like, okay, where is that within? What does that mean within what you're the context of what you're talking about? But so from what you're saying here, working through in a sense these contracts is not simply just to feel good, but is to allow ourselves to be ourselves, to get in touch with those other aspects that we've kind of heretofore kept at bay in a sense.
Or that society has told us are not okay, or our family systems have told us are not
Mm-hmm.
okay.
What did, you said a lot of us don't, and I'll put myself in this category too. We don't allow ourselves to feel warmth.
Mm.
Say more about that.
Well, each of us have, as a mammal, we all have a warmth circuit. We all have a care circuit. So we've all got the equipment. Everybody's got it. And the question is, do we get to use it? And do we get to use it for ourselves as well as for others? And we've lived in a world that's been molded and modeled after different ideas that come from both attachment but also from religion, like ideas about how if you are warm with yourselves, it's selfish,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not really worshiping God if you're warm with yourself. You're putting yourself first, and different ideas like that. I mean, so many of them just come right back again and again to integrity. Like
Mm-hmm.
people really, they're not trying to do themselves harm by not accessing their warmth, but they learned early that warmth was not okay. Like when little kids get proud and satisfied, so often they'll hear, "You're too big for your britches," or "What do you think you are, a princess?" Or
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's lots of different ways that our society and our family groups and our cultures give children the message, not to experience the high points of life, because it's because it blows the circuits of the adults that are around them. They have their own things that they learned, and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Um, One of the statistics that I find so fascinating is that in North America, 95% of white males drink alcohol. There's only 5% of white males who do not drink alcohol in North America.
When you say drink alcohol, what is that? Just like on a regular basis,
Yeah,
or?
regular basis. Yeah, yeah. And that's a higher number. The 95% is a higher number than any other group,
Mm.
any other socioeconomic ethnic group is white males. And if you think about the allowable emotional expression for white males, it's very small.
Right.
It's a very small emotional expression.
This reminds me, if I may again, you say you talk, and it just brings up a lot of memories for me. It reminds me of our youngest daughter is 5.5. So this happened right before she was born. I was at work. I was working in a clinic in Northern California, and I remember we were doing a group, and I was at the board doing something, and I started feeling like really like a pain in my chest, and my left arm was like bothering me, and I was like, oh man, something's going on. So I went home, told my wife Lauren. She said, you need to go to the doctor right away. And fortunately, we were living in Oakland, really close to the hospital. I went to the hospital, and they were like, okay. They were trying to be very calm because these were the signs, classic signs of like a heart attack. Brought me down to the emergency room. I got on a gurney in a room. I was by myself. The doctor came in, and he started talking to me, and he said, really, really awesome doctor. He's like, just talking to me, like, what's going on? Da, da, da. And I said, um, we're about to have a baby. And he said, whoa, his response to that was just very human. And I broke down. I
Wow.
broke down, Sarah. And I
Wow.
was like, in a way that I hadn't before.
Mm.
And we were talking. And he's like, all right, stay here. He had checked my vitals such that and knew that I was okay at the moment. He left the room for about 5 minutes, and I was laying back on the gurney, and I remember calling or texting my wife. I had never felt more relaxed and
Mm.
calm in
Mm.
that moment. And it was just what you're saying. It's like I wasn't allowing myself to express all these different emotions. It's so true. You speak the truth. It's crazy. That's why I would say it's so, you read this book, you cannot help but see your oneself in it, you know? It's how we get through life. And of course, there are different levels in a sense, right? Some people uh, work out these contracts through addictions
Yeah,
and so forth.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And Gabor would say that some people work them out through health issues.
Mm.
That he has that beautiful book, When the Body Says No, and all about the ways in which our health comes in to try to save us from our own contracts, to give ourselves away completely and never
Mm.
leave even a bit for ourselves. So we see it everywhere, in our addictions, in our compulsions, in what makes us ill, in what makes us well, in the ways our relationships work, and how much meaning we have, how much depression we have, how much
Mm-hmm.
anxiety we have.
The idea that, you know, we are challenged by allowing ourselves to feel warmth, to me is sad.
Yeah.
You know, it's very sad that we we grow up like this, or things happen to us. You know, what were you saying? 4 months old?
Yes, by 4 months old. Yeah.
Crazy.
Before words even come. Yeah, we're already matching. We're such little pattern matching beings.
What
Yeah.
did you? What did you? One of some of the things you learned through the writing of this book.
Oh, I learned through the writing of this book, um, to just have so much love for us humans, just so much warmth for all the funny things that we do to try to make up for, not having accompaniment, not experiencing a world of resonance. And and uh, it- it's a journey that strips away blame.
Mm.
As we take it, we start to think, oh, here's, for example, if I've always blamed my mother for certain things, and all of a sudden I'll go, oh, she had terrible
Mm-hmm.
contracts that kept her almost entirely locked away from life as it was. There was just little slivers of moments where I got to touch her essence. Or, oh, I have a grudge against an entire class of voters, in whatever my country is, or political party members, and I can go, oh, and their contracts are extraordinary as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and of course, it also, I mean, I think for all of us, there are these bewildering moments when you say things really clearly to people, and you know that you were very clear, but what they hear is completely different than what you said. And you go, oh, it was a contract.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just trying to make me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They're not being stubborn. Um, they're not being obstreperous. They just have contracts.
Mm. So yeah, so really allowing for the complexity of the human being. One of the questions I love, and I think it's early on in the book, is, you know, are you willing to love yourself or to like yourself? Are you willing, like, the phrasing of that I really like, because it's very allowing in a sense. You know, are you willing to think this way? um and it's a deep question in a sense, you know.
That is.
Can we start here? Are you
Mhm.
willing to, like, what would it be like? um Really interesting. Yeah, I think I was really struck by how the book really invites you to think about what's going on. And just as you're saying, you know, there are reasons for how we're all kind of muddling through this crazy world, this crazy life.
Ah,
But at the same time, there are ways that we can become richer, right? We can meet life more. I love that. I definitely could benefit from that myself. So, um, all right, Sarah, in terms of, a lot of therapists are listening to this, a lot of survivors and trauma therapists, survivors are listening to this. Um, my guess, and obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this would be a really good piece for a therapist to not only read, but to take into their toolkit, as it were. What are your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. And I've really been loving your response to the book because it's been so warm. And one of the things I always worry about when we learn a new tool is that we'll begin to kind of use it as if it were a scalpel instead of instead of, bringing it out as like a little offering, as a possible offering in a warm and protected space. So it's a fabulous intervention, and the more it's accompanied with warmth and resonance and a sense of standing beside each other and
Mm,
really appreciating the contracts for their beauty and their contribution to our survival and well-being. It's it kind of creates this funny incongruent moment, I think, sometimes when somebody finds a really difficult and painful contract and I go, oh my God, that's so beautiful. Sort of not quite a match, for the
mhm,
pain that's coming as we discover it. And at the same time, these patterns are just, we are so creative.
mhm.
Yeah, so definitely a lovely addition to the offerings that people can bring to each other in any context. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I think that's a testament to the way it's written and the language you're using in the book, because that's what certainly resonated with me, if I can use that word.
Yeah.
All right, Sarah, love it. The book is called Your Resonant Self Workbook. I've got it right here. Sarah Peyton. Sarah, what's the best? First of all, I mean, I'll have this linked up at the show notes page, but where can people get the book?
They can get the book on any online bookseller, or they can special order it through their brick and mortar bookseller if they want to support brick and mortar bookshops, which I always love.
Okay, okay.
The purchases on Amazon do nicely for me because they give me those wonderful numbers, but wherever people want to buy it, they can.
Okay, awesome. And in terms of the best way for people to get in contact with you.
They can get in contact with my offerings and my store and everything that's up and possible to work with, including lots of free material on my website, sarahpayton.com. And they can also get downloads of these meditations too. There were downloads of the original meditations for book one, and there are downloads of meditations for book two for free on the book website, yourresonantself.com.
Okay. Now, earlier on, you mentioned, you've been traveling all over. Are you still doing workshops and trainings now? What's going
Yes,
on?
yes, doing workshops and trainings
Okay.
for the world from this room.
Wow.
Yeah, I was working for India last week, and I'll be working for Turkey in July, and
Exciting.
Poland at the end of this week. And yeah, so there's lots of stuff to dive into if you're intrigued, if you're interested, if you have a sense that this is a good trail to follow.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, it's always a pleasure talking with you, and I love the work you're doing. It just it cuts to the core, and it resonates with what I hope this podcast is about. And thank you so much for coming on here and again doing this amazing work.
Oh, and thank you guys for the work that you do, bringing this stuff out to people who can use it.
I appreciate that. All right, take care. Be well.